Okay, so here I am, Linda Christensen. I'm just going to do a little talk here about religious beliefs in Arabia prior to the rise of Islam. Now, let me just share my screen. Um, yeah, let me just think here. Where do I share screen? Okay, now I need to. Why is it that Google Chrome? Oh, okay, is that happening? That's what I want. Okay. Launching. Why does it say launching? That's not what I want. I want this here. There. There we go. Okay, good. Now, okay, now what I will do is expand this so that you don't see that. How do I? Let me just think here. There's got to be a way. Present. Does this move? Yes, it does. I'm going to move you over here. Present. There we go. All right, that's better. Okay, good. Okay, we're rocking here. So, so the context here, to set a little bit of context about what were some religious beliefs and practices in Arabia prior to the rise of Islam. And as you probably know, Muhammad was born, or the tradition is he was born in the year 570 and died in the year 632. AD or CE, the Common Era. Okay, so we're just before this time. So again, this is when the Roman Empire has collapsed. We've got the spread of Christianity happening, the dispersion of the Jewish people after the Jewish-Roman War. So Jews were living everywhere else. Just so for a bit of context. And so what do we find here in Arabia? What we have here is pretty common in the ancient world, is a belief in polytheism, a belief that there are many deities is very much the norm, okay? And so as you can see here, three very popular deities were referred to as the daughters of Allah, the goddesses of the sun, Venus, and fate. So they were each a goddess. There also were various tribal deities. It's a tribal society in Arabia, and so every tribe had a guardian deity that was responsible for protecting and providing and leading that particular tribe as sort of their protector. And Allah was the guardian deity for the Quraysh tribe, which is the tribe that Muhammad belonged to. Okay. And the Quraysh tribe also is the one that's responsible for looking after the Kaaba, which is here in the second little paragraph there, which is a very important holy place in Mecca even today. But the Quraysh tribe, Muhammad's tribe, they were responsible for taking care of that. And we'll talk about that more in a sec. So, and also there are many other deities, all right, hundreds of them literally. And just a little note here, the word Allah was one God amongst many, a very important God by this time, a creator type of God. And the word Allah is literally, as you can see here on the screen, it is the prefix il, along with Allah, simply meaning the God. Okay, and so that is what the word refers to. It just simply means the God. And it is a word that Jews would have used if they were speaking Arabic, living in Arabia, as many were. They would use the word Allah in reference just simply to God as a word, as God, right? And so it's related to the Hebrew word El, which is equally simply the word for God. So just to be aware of that. Now, but again, he's one God amongst many. So what we have here in the city of Mecca in Arabia is that it housed a very important holy place known as the Kaaba. And the tradition is that there were 360 deities that were housed there. So people would come on a pilgrimage to Mecca from all over. Once a year, they would go make a special trip to Mecca to worship their gods there, along any other time that they wanted to, but it was sort of an expected kind of thing that they'd always make a trip once a year. And this is where you can see later on the Muslim Hajj is related to that, making a trip to Mecca, once in your lifetime. So people would do this. And 360 deities were housed in there. One of the more important deities was Hubal, the god of divination, that was associated with a bucket of arrows, and that you could kind of get an answer to your question by the tossing of an arrow. Excuse me. Also, inside the Kaaba at that time, there was a painting on one of the walls of Jesus and Mary put on the wall. It was a very simple cube box-like building, not a fancy temple, an outdoor kind of holy space around it, just as what you would have today in Mecca, in terms of the Kaaba that still exists there today. So this is a key thing about Mecca, is that it was a holy place for people to come to worship their gods there, and there are many of them. Now, as I mentioned, Allah was one God amongst many, etc. And also what we know is at that time in Arabia, there was a trend amongst certain Arabs to be seekers after one God. Contra most Arabs who were polytheists, there were those who felt there really must be only one supreme God, one supreme being. And they were known as Hanifs. Okay, Hanifs, the monotheists. And it seems that perhaps Muhammad was a part of that trend, because there are references to this sort of thing going on. Okay, all right. So now why does it not go to the next screen? Aha, there we go. Other practices and beliefs this time period. Now I should move my little thing up here so it's not in the way. Okay. Now, we find, again, something very common in the ancient world is certain animistic beliefs or forms of animism, which means that various objects in nature are seen to have a special holy presence about them, a special spiritual force or energy associated with them. And so what was very common is certain stones or springs, wells as a source of water, were deemed as being very holy, having a special spiritual power of some kind. And this is something that will continue on in Islam. So you've got here is a picture on the slide on the right, that silver casing, it encases a black meteorite. That is very important, and we'll talk about that later. The story about that is it's embedded in one of the corners of the Kaaba, is believed to have a holy power, and that if you kiss the stone, it will absorb your sin. Okay, but this is a carryover into Islam, is that idea. There also is a place, there's a spring where water comes from there by Mecca, and this is believed to be the place where, when Abraham had told his concubine, his maid servant Hagar, who had become pregnant with Ishmael, to leave and sent them off with a caravan of goods out into the desert, is believed that this is where they ended up, and that this is the place when they ran out of water that God miraculously caused forth a spring to come so they wouldn't die of thirst in the desert. So it's believed to be here in Mecca where this it exists. And this is a holy place, and it's seen as holy water that comes out of this well. So you have these sorts of things that are still today in Islam, but they are a carryover from past beliefs in ancient Arabia. There also was widespread belief in these spirits known as the Jinn, the genie that comes out of Aladdin's lamp, right? As you can see here, riding his magic carpet. And so the Jinn are spirits that largely are muses that can inspire you. This is what you'd have in ancient Greco-Roman beliefs and all over the world too. And even the world, when you are inspired, it is a spirit that is inspiring you for creative some kind of creative insight or ability. So the Jinn were known as being especially powerful in inspiring poets. And poetry was the big art in ancient Arabia. And they would have contests, poetry contests. And it would be similar to what rappers do today, where there'd be an audience there and they would throw out words, okay, that would be put out. And the poet then on the spot would have to create this amazing poem with all of those words that the audience had put forth. And it would be a competition as to who would come up with the best poem on the spot. Okay, they would do these sorts of things in ancient Arabia. So this is a very important thing. Excuse me. However, the belief is as well that these spirits, yes, they can inspire you, give you creative inspirations, but they also can possess you, and you'll start hearing voices in your head, and they can drive you mad, and you can go crazy, right? And this is something that Muhammad is going to think that has happened to him, and he's going to also be accused of this when he starts getting these revelations, okay? They also can appear in different guises. They can appear in various forms. They're shapeshifters, tend to be a bit deceptive, and they have, spiritual superpowers, and you can, trap them in ways and make use of their powers on your behalf through magic. So they become your servants and slaves, and you've got that whole tradition, and that's what the whole Aladdin story is all about. Okay, so those are the jinn. And they will show up in the Quran throughout as well, in terms of passages, always referring to them. Or not always, but a lot of passages do. Now, there also was in Arabia a holy month of truce, and this usually happened about 4 times a year, where it was a given that during this month there would be peace throughout Arabia. No one would attack anybody else. You could freely walk around without a sword, without fear of being attacked or a fear of being raided, because that was very common. Raiding of caravans was a thing, and that you could freely travel here, and also that you would be free to travel to the Kaaba to worship your God without being afraid of being attacked. Okay, and that also is something we'll carry over into Islam in terms of the month of fasting as a holy month of the year, right? And what people would do is when they did go to worship their gods at the Kaaba, they would encircle it 7 times. Okay, and that continues on as well in Islam in terms of when people do the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. And so it seems that this is tied in with perhaps kind of like making a journey through the heavens of the 7 heavens. Very common belief at that time period that correlates that there's a heaven, we have Earth, and then around us is the sun, and then the moon, and then the various planets that make up the different spheres, heavenly spheres around us. And so it seems that a lot of the religious beliefs and practices, some of them had strong astral connections, and that is perhaps why even the crescent moon and the star, as you see here, that is a symbol for Islam. Okay, that's become a symbol for Islam, and it seems to reflect these ancient roots. Like I mentioned, the god, the sun goddess, Venus goddess, goddess of fate, destiny, right? That seem to be tied in with that. Okay. And now why is this not working? It did before. Now why is it? How do I go to the next slide? Oh, I press on it? No. What happens here? How come? There we go. Okay. Now, what we also have in ancient Arabia here at this time is we have various Jewish and Christian communities, okay? As I mentioned earlier, as a result of the dispersion of the Jews under, with the conflict with the Romans, the Jewish-Roman War in the year 70 that then destroyed the temple, and then they were not even allowed in Jerusalem, and Jewish settlements were destroyed, and the Jews start spreading all over the place, and many go to Arabia. Okay, and a very large Jewish community that was also very prosperous one was at Medina, formerly called Yathrib. And it was predominantly, at least over half of the people there were Jewish. And this is held to have been Muhammad's mother's native town, all right? And so this could be perhaps, again, the strong Jewish influence here. All the stories of the Bible are in the Quran, the various figures, again, tweaked a bit here and there, but it draws heavily from the Jewish tradition. Right. Now, so we have that. Okay, we know that there are, again, various Jewish communities there. There also were a number of Christian communities, specifically monasteries in Arabia. The desert monks leaving society, trying to seek union with God out in the desert without any distractions, worldly influences, living an austere life in the desert of prayer. Right? There were such monasteries there, and there's quite a tradition here within Islam of Muhammad visiting them and befriending them. In fact, Muhammad's wife, we'll talk about her in a bit, Muhammad's wife's cousin was apparently a Christian that also encouraged Muhammad to believe that he was a prophet. Okay, so there's quite a bit of Christian influence coming in here too. So there is a tradition where Muhammad goes to visit these monasteries and befriended some of these monks, and he received from them a woolen tunic. They used to wear these woolen tunics as a form of self-discipline, that they're hot, they're itchy, they're not comfortable, and it's a way of renouncing any attachment to physical desires and physical comfort. And so you're just dedicated in your prayer and your spiritual practice. And so they would wear these woolen tunics. And so they gave one to Muhammad, and then later when we have the rise of the mystics of Islam, they take on this practice of wearing woolen tunics like the Christian monks did. And so they became known then as the Sufis. And the word Suf means wool, and that's where the word Sufi comes from. Okay. Yeah. And we also have, we know that there was an Nestorian community. Again, there's always a lot of detail and information. I don't want to overwhelm you, but it's a particular group that did not agree with some of the verdicts coming out of the church councils when we discussed the development of Christology, the specific doctrines, kind of nailing out what does it all mean for Jesus to be both human and divine? How can one being be of both natures, both substances at the same time? How does that all play out? Well, the Nestorians kind of, they're a particular group that didn't agree with the total union of the two natures, and they held that they could be separated. Okay, it was this whole thing, but they kind of lived in Arabia. There was a community there. So to make a long story short, though, it's very obvious that Muhammad definitely had both Jewish and Christian influence coming in, and it will show up throughout the Quran, as well as various beliefs and teachings. Muhammad had very strong reverence for Jesus as a prophet. Okay, now why is it that see when I did it before? Oh, now we go. Here we go. Okay, So now let's go on to the life of Muhammad himself, okay? And so there you have his dates. Now, there's a lot of tragedy about his life in the sense that while his mother was still pregnant with him, his father died, while she was pregnant. So when he was actually born, there was no father to acknowledge the son as being his son. Therefore, technically, he was born as an illegitimate child, and that would have meant at that time period, he was not granted any kind of inheritance, right? Then at the age of 6, his mother died, and he then went to live with his grandfather. Then at the age of 8, his grandfather died, and he went to live with his uncle Abu Talib, who was a head of a particular clan within the Quraysh tribe. And as I had mentioned in class, you have a tribal system, so you've got a tribe that is made up of various clans, and each clan is made up of various families, and all together they are of one tribe. Right? And this whole tribal social system plays a key role in the spread of Islam because they form political and economic alliances with each other, and that then could put pressure on. If you get one tribe to convert to Islam, but he's in alliance with all these other tribes, and okay, are they going to economically boycott them now, or are they going to decide that this one tribe will join with this one and maintain those economic ties and also convert? So if you get the chief, the head of the tribe, to convert, you'll get the whole cabango of who knows how many, thousands of people or whatever to convert in terms of all the clans and the families, right? And then that will put pressure on others, and very quickly it can escalate that they all then are pressured in through these alliances to convert and come over to the side of Muhammad. Okay, and this is what's going to happen down the road. So now, okay, so where was I? So his uncle was the head of a clan within the Quraysh tribe. And so he then lived with his uncle from the age of 8 onward. And his uncle had a son, Ali, who then is his cousin, all right? And he's going to play a key role later on in terms of Islam, where we're going to have a major split between the Sunni and the Shia. It's going to be around this, where Ali is going to be held to be the leader over the Shia. Okay, and we'll talk about that later, but just so you know. So then he was working, and what most people seem to do is they work in a caravan. The delivering of goods and trading from A to B, and working in a caravan. And so he did this, and he ended up working in a caravan that was owned by a widow, a wealthy widow. All right, who was so impressed with Muhammad that she proposed marriage to him and asked him to marry her. And what's so interesting is that she was 40 and he was 25, right? And what I just want to highlight here is here you have in ancient Arabia, right, you have the phenomena of a woman being wealthy, being a business owner, and proposing a marriage to a man 15 years younger than her. I mean, pretty radical in terms of, quote, women's rights, because there's always so much talk about, women's rights in Islam. And so it was really bad before Muhammad, before Islam. But, there's some things that can be debated there. Okay, you had the Queen of Sheba, who was the Queen of Arabia way back. And yes, indeed, female infanticide was very common and prevalent, but almost everywhere in the world anyway, India, China, what have you. You need to have a son. Having a son is always the big thing to carry on the family line. That's so much the norm virtually everywhere. So anyways, this is what happens. He gets married. So now he then gains some wealth and seems to be able to then have more time to spend in prayer, meditation, seeking God. And so the story, to continue on, is at the age of 40, in the year 610, we have his receiving the first revelation. And this event of his receiving the first revelation is referred to or celebrated in the Muslim tradition as the Night of Power. So he's outside of the city of Mecca in a cave, spending time there in meditation and prayer. And what happens is he's kind of like in a bit of a trance state, it seems, and he hears a voice speaking and blatantly, clearly hears these words. Right? And I'm just going to read to you the first revelation that comes. It goes like this. Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from clots of blood. Recite. Your Lord is the most bountiful one, who by the pen taught man what he did not know. Indeed, man transgresses in thinking himself to be his own master. That is sort of the sense of ego that you think, oh, I am my own master. I forge my own destiny. It's like, no. Everything is the will of Allah. Submission to the will of Allah. That's what Islam is all about. Anyways, I kind of added a little interpretation there in terms of the implication. So indeed, man transgresses, sins in thinking himself to be his own master. But no, unto your Lord all things shall return. Okay, so he gets his first revelation. And again, the command given is recite, i.e. speak forth. Right? And that, as you can see here, he'll be getting more revelations now for the rest of his life until he dies. And these revelations are going to be memorized, kept in various ways, some written down, others memorized, written down here, there, whatever. And they're eventually going to be compiled to make up the Quran. And the Quran itself, the word Quran literally means recitation. Okay, so that's what the Quran is. It is the recitation, the words that are meant to be spoken forth. And this is something that is central to, something a bit distinctive to Islam and their holy book compared to other religions, is that the words of God were spoken and they're meant to be spoken, and they're words that are meant to be heard. So the Quran is something that you're meant to hear, not just quietly read to yourself. They're meant to be heard. And it's through the power of the poetic flow in Arabic. And that is what's so moving about it, what's so powerful about it. And that just can't be translated into another language. It's meant to always be in Arabic, and it's meant to be heard. And so what's going to happen is right at the outset, the Quran is going to be memorized by reciters, those who will have memorized it, and they will then be chanting it, speaking it forth all the time, as opposed to just having it in a book form and everybody reading it. Okay, so this is what's going to happen, is it's something that's going to be memorized and spoken forth. And so with this, Muhammad, he starts getting these revelations, and I'll go on with that in a sec here. Now, at first, he's absolutely terrified. It's like, what on earth is going on? He thinks, aha, it's the Jinn. I've become possessed by the Jinn. I'm hearing these voices. I've gone mad. And he wants to throw himself over a cliff and commit suicide. But the tradition has it that the angel Gabriel stops him from doing that. Gabriel is deemed to be the angel of revelation. That is his job, is to bring the revelations from God to the prophets. And so the angel Gabriel stops him from committing suicide, jumping off a cliff, and tells him that, Muhammad, you are not crazy, but you are indeed called to be a prophet, a messenger of God. These are the words of God that I am bringing to you, right? And so this sort of comes to him. And so he then, again, you'll have different text here, but another little story about this is that he runs home terrified from hearing these words in his head. He's under a cover, shaking under a blanket, and his wife comes to him, Khadija. I didn't tell you her name. That's Khadija, that's his wife, and asks, "Oh, my dear husband, what's wrong?" And he tells her, "I've been hearing these voices, these words, and this is what they say, you know, and the angel Gabriel said that I'm called to be a prophet, and da da da." And she comforts him and supports him and encourages him and tells him, "My dear beloved husband, yes, indeed, you must be called to be a prophet. Believe what the angel Gabriel says, all right? And accept this role that you've been given," basically. Again, all my paraphrase, all right? And then also her cousin, who was a Christian, also convinces him that, you know, accept these revelations, these words that you're getting, that you are indeed a prophet. So his wife, okay, is the first convert, the first believer in Muhammad as a prophet. Yeah? And again, that's something that is given to a woman, to be the first believer. So this is how it all begins. So he starts accepting these revelations, and he starts getting these words. You know, he's hearing them, and eventually he's told that, listen, you know, you're meant to speak these forth. You're meant to give this out to the people at Mecca. So he would do this in the heart of the city by the Kaaba. He would then start to speak forth these words that are coming to him. And basically his message, oh, I didn't say this little note here earlier. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. Forgot about that. His message was simply this: A, there's no God but Allah. Okay, there's no God but Allah. Number 2, a judgment day is coming. Okay, judgment day is coming. Number 3, therefore repent. Stop worshiping all other gods and worship Allah alone, or else you will not fare well on judgment day. If you worship a God alone, you will go to heaven or paradise. If you don't, you will go to Gehenna or hell. Okay, and so he made it clear increasingly that his intent was that the Kaaba should become the holy house of Allah, consecrated to Allah alone, and all the other deities, 360 deities, should be removed. It should be purged, purified for Allah alone. Okay, so this is his message. Now, at first, the people thought, hey, you know, what's with Muhammad? We've known this guy all his life. What's with him, right? Is this some kind of a phase he's going through, you know, whatever? And they kind of didn't give it much thought or pay much attention. It's like, a bit of a nuisance. But he keeps preaching, wouldn't stop. Then they start ridiculing him, mocking him, making fun of him, making the accusations that, aha, you've gone majnun, you know, the jinn have gotten a possession of you, you've gone crazy, Muhammad. Or they also accuse him of epilepsy, because sometimes he would kind of shake, convulse, go into a trance state, and it seemed like having seizures or something as these revelations are coming to him. So they made accusations of him being epileptic, you know. They started harassing him, but he kept preaching. He wouldn't stop. Now, the people didn't like what they were hearing. For obvious reasons. Number one, hey, it's no more religious freedom. We're no longer, people aren't free to worship whatever gods they want here. We can only worship Allah alone. Like, who do you think you are to tell us that, right? People aren't too crazy about that idea. They want to hold to their religious freedom. So that's one big issue, of course. And then the second one is, though, as well, is an economic one, because people were coming from all over Arabia to worship their gods here. And so if we tell them, like, no, you can only worship Allah here, none of these other gods, that's going to really hit the businesses. There's not going to be the money coming in economically. And so they did not like this idea. I mean, just imagine, you know, at Rome, the Vatican being removed. There's no longer the Pope there. How many Catholics would not be visiting Rome anymore and bringing the money to town? Okay, so this was an issue. And so they did not like the idea and did not accept it. Okay. And excuse me, it probably was more threatening, or equal. Another factor in threatening about it is that Muhammad himself was of the Quraysh tribe, and the Quraysh tribe was responsible for taking care of the Kaaba. Okay, so this is a big issue here. Now I just see here, I just want to make note of this in terms of the sources for all of this history about early Islam and Muhammad. Okay, it's coming from a book written by Ibn Hisham, The Life of the Prophet, okay, the Messenger of God, who died around 833-34. That's the main source for the history of Islam that we've got, because we really don't have much. Okay, so they're Muslim sources predominantly, and that's why. And I forgot to mention it here. I did in class. Anyways, I'll come back to this. So you can see here, this is 200 years later. Now, his work is draws heavily from an earlier work by Ibn Ishaq of the year 767 to 768. He died around there, okay? Now, let me see. I thought I had, oopsie-doops, a little bit more written down there. What was it? Oh, his work was called, The Book of Military Expeditions of the Prophet Muhammad, okay? And so anyways, the sources are really actually quite late. And so again, there's a lot of issue about how reliable are they or not, how totally accurate are they or not. That's a big issue, okay? And that's why there's, I have in the slides on videos, there's some really good videos here, especially in recent years. A lot more scholarship has gone into this, and a lot that's questioning some of the history of early Islam. That Mecca, and again, I'll just end with this because again, please do watch the videos, good stuff there. But Mecca is only mentioned once in the Quran. And so much of the topography in terms of the landscape of the region, how it's described in the Quran, does not fit with Mecca. Okay, in terms of the vegetation, the water, various things, they do not fit with Mecca. All right, it fits instead with the city of Petra, which is today in Jordan, and Petra was further north. And we know historically Petra was a major spiritual center at that time, a holy place of people worshiping various gods there. It was a very important religious center. Also, the archaeologists have discovered so many of the earliest mosques, and the earliest mosques that they've excavated here in this early period, they do not face the direction of Mecca. They face the direction of Petra. And so anyway, do watch a video. There's a lot of detail about this. And also Mecca really was not on the trading route. It was not a part of the passage lane of goods going from east to west or west to east, okay? Whereas Petra was. I mean, there's a lot of issues here that seem to support that indeed Mecca was really not the place where this is happening. And again, it's complex. There's a lot of stuff here, but do watch that one video, and I forget what it's called, but I've got it there on the slide, and I'll maybe, I'll show, anyways, it's there. I think it's got a note about what it is, okay? It's really good. Yeah, it's very interesting, and it shows you all kinds of things. It's very interesting. Anyway, there you go. I just needed to point that out, okay? All right. So what happens? Yes, as I mentioned, at first he's ridiculed, harassed, accused of being possessed, etc., all that stuff, right? But he wouldn't quit preaching. Okay. Now, so what happens is he finds, and then they start put, of course, economic boycotting put in place, and that the other clans refused to trade goods with the clan of his uncle that Muhammad was a part of, his uncle supported him, his cousin Ali supported him, all right, he had some family support this way, and a few converts, they started to support him, but economically they're always under this boycott, but they managed to hold strong because, they were kind of well off and were able to hold up. But eventually that gets more challenging. And so then he finds out that the people at Mecca were planning to kill him. All right, that there was sort of a plot in place to bring him to an end. And so he realized he had to leave Mecca. So he finds, again, to make a long story short, he settles in, and I'll just move this over here a little bit. It's out of the way. He migrates to Medina. And Medina, as you can see here in the middle, is the town. It used to be called Yathrib, but it becomes known as Medina, which is in Arabic, it was an abbreviation for the term, the city of the prophet. It's going to become known as the city of the prophet, okay? But it used to be called Yathrib. And that is that town where, as I said, his mother's native town was predominantly Jewish, right? They had no problem with Muhammad's message. They're monotheists, okay? As Jews, it's like, yeah, well, we worship only one God, Allah. We don't worship all these other gods. No problem, okay? So they're receptive to Muhammad. And they also thought that, hey, he could maybe help us out, because there were two Jewish tribes who were a constant feud, fighting with each other, constant conflict. And they thought an outsider like Muhammad could finally bring peace to the city. And so they basically gave over the reins to him, where he comes into Medina, I'm just going to call it Medina, and comes into power. So now he's no longer just a prophet, taking on a position of religious leadership. He now comes into political leadership as a statesman. Okay. And we do find that the revelations change. And one thing that people do when they study the Quran or read from it or what have you, they always make note, is this a revelation given at Mecca or Medina? Okay. That's always the first thing you do, is a Meccan revelation or Medina. And because they start shifting a bit in terms of the content and also the tone in various ways, which I'll talk about. So, and Mecca was mostly fiery messages about the coming day of judgment, worship Allah alone. But in Medina, it becomes more judicial, legislative, dealing with legalities of how to live in terms of marriage, divorce, how to pray, how to fast, how to this, that, whatever, things like that. Okay, it becomes a bit more judicial. Okay. So yeah, and as I was going to say here, and after about 13 years of preaching, okay, 13 years of preaching, he gained about 11 families had converted, were on his side, 11 families making up around 200 people, okay, after all that time. Okay, now why is it, I just never know why I can't, okay, there we go. Oh, did I miss one? Yes, I did. Okay, here we go. All righty. So, I do think that when I have it like this, I take longer than I do when I'm doing it in class. I don't know, it seems that way to me. So there are going to be a number of battles that take place. Why? Because even though now Muhammad and his followers are over in Medina, you still have Mecca here. It was clear that Muhammad's intention, his intention is still to have the Kaaba purified, all right, purified of all the idols. And so they're in a state of Cold War at each other. And the economic boycotting comes into play full on, where the people at Mecca boycott all the people at Medina. Okay, so you've got this economic boycott in place. In the meantime, so make a long story short here, okay, there's going to be a number of battles that take place. The first one is after a couple of years, the people at Medina start running out of supplies. So it's during a month, the holy month of truce, where it's a given on Arabs' honor that there's no attacking of one another, no raiding of caravans, that you can go freely throughout Arabia without a sword in your pocket, all right? That is when Muhammad decides to raid a caravan, because he felt this is his only chance to get the goods. And so again, to kind of act it out. So there'll be a caravan here, and the people will say, oh, what's that? See a cloud of dust in the horizon. Oh, somebody goes and checks out. It's Muhammad with a bunch of men coming with their swords. They're going to raid us and attack us. And so then somebody quickly goes to Medina, to Mecca, and say, we need an army to protect us. And they quickly send out an army. And so what happens, a battle takes place between Muhammad's 300 and the Meccans 1,000. And Muhammad wins the battle, and they gain the caravan. And it's seen as great victory, the vindication of Allah. Allah is indeed on our side. We won this battle. Okay. Now, well, okay, yeah, I got that. Okay, there you go. Now here, I just want to read this, because this passage, along with others, but this passage that comes as a revelation after this event, okay, vindicating it, is then taken as a passage that supports jihad, holy war, okay, in Islam. And so here, I'll just read it to you. And this is Allah speaking. Whenever you have the revelations in the Quran, it's held that it's Allah himself who's speaking here, okay? So it goes like this. And this is from Surah 216. I meant to change that. I can't change it now, can I? Okay. 216 following. Okay, so that's not quite right. I just did that off the top of my head, and I forgot to check. From chapter 2, or Surah 2, verse 216 onward, okay? Okay, fighting is obligatory for you, okay? It's your obligation, it's your duty to fight. As much as you may dislike it, people will ask you about this holy month of truce. But say unto them, yes, indeed, to fight in this month is a serious offense, but To keep others from the path of Allah, to deny him, and to expel his worshippers from the Kaaba is far more serious in his sight. Idolatry is worse than massacre. Okay? To worship other gods is a worse sin than killing the unbeliever. Okay? And that gets just taken to justify, quote, holy war. All right? Jihad. That key passage there is one. All right. So anyways, that's the first battle that takes place. A year later, another battle takes place. It isn't so fortunate. The Meccans attack Muhammad, and anyways, Muhammad's men, they lose. Muhammad himself gets wounded, but they still maintain their freedom and independence. Then there's going to be third battle, the Battle of the Ditch, where the Meccans are coming up with an army of, what was it, 10,000? Or 10,000, I think so. No, I got it written down here. 10,000, yeah. And Muhammad finds out that, they're coming with an army of 10,000. So he has his men dig a deep ditch all around Medina. So the Meccans can't cross the ditch. And so they're held under siege. And so then while they're all out there bickering and holding Medina under siege, the Meccans, they start fighting amongst each other, and it just totally falls apart. Okay, so they were sort of spared of that, and they kind of win the Battle of the Ditch, and by default, in a sense. And so, but in the meantime, through all of this, Muhammad finds out that there were among the Jews a number of them that had betrayed him. Some of them had regretted allowing Muhammad coming into power at Medina, and they did not believe that he was indeed a prophet at all anymore. And they resented, the power he's come into play and the coercion that was going on about things. And so they were starting to try to negotiate and figure out some way, along with the Meccans, how they could get rid of Muhammad. Okay, so they were sort of betraying him. And Muhammad finds out, and again, to make a long story short, the numbers vary. Anywhere from 800 to 900 men were then, Jewish men, were beheaded, and their women and children were sold into slavery, right? And so through this time period at Medina, we find some shifts happening in place. The tone in the beginning was that, especially in Mecca, is that Muhammad is very friendly towards the Jews and Christians. They're referred to as the people of the book, and that there should be no compulsion in matters of religion, right? You'll have those kind of passages, but they're earlier passages. And that at first they prayed 3 times, the Muslims prayed 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem, just like what Jews would do. Okay, that was sort of the Jewish thing to do, right? But now with this conflict and increasing tension, and not being Jews and Christians, maybe, I don't know, seeming to challenge him in ways and not accepting his prophethood, that the tone changes, that they're not to be trusted. Do not make Jews or Christians your friends. Instead of praying 3 times a day facing Jerusalem, well, we're going to pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. So you'll find shifts happening here in the latter period as things change. Okay, that's the kind of revelations that come through, just to be aware of. Okay. Well, then in the meantime, through all of this, though, Muhammad is growing in power, and he's forming more and more tribal alliances. Yes, many raids on caravans, many attacks on groups of people here and there. There's all kinds of, Muhammad, basically, he was a warlord, okay? There was a lot of battles, a lot of fights. And I just mentioned the 3 main ones with Mecca, okay, the big ones with Mecca, but otherwise there was a lot of, attacking of various communities and caravans and doing all kinds of things like that. And that whenever they got the goods of a caravan, it was the gift from Allah, the booty from Allah, it's sort of a reward for their faithfulness, basically. And so increasingly people start forming alliances with Muhammad to be on his side. So they're not the ones getting attacked, but they'll be on his side that will be doing the attacking. And so more alliances form. And as I mentioned, they form that pressure through economic alignment, and that they start coming more and more onto his side. So he starts growing in power. So he then ends up again, make a long story short, entering into a bit of a negotiation with the people at Mecca, that listen, I want to come and with my men to worship Allah at Mecca. And they kind of agree to a bit of a truce and agreement that yes, we'll let you come and worship Allah there. And this is what happens. Muhammad does kind of go ahead with that, but comes in with an army of 10,000. And again, it's all a lot of detailed history and complications, all this. But to make a long story short, the Meccans cave in, and seeing him coming in with 10,000 men, they peacefully surrender to Muhammad. And that happens in the year 630. Okay. And the first thing he did is went to the Kaaba and removed all idols. All right. There would be the odd person trying to stop him and they got killed, but he got his way in having it become consecrated to be the holy house of Allah. And so one thing he did not do is he did not remove the painting of Jesus and Mary that was in there. But he gained a victory. And so now all of Mecca surrenders to Muhammad and submits to Islam, along with Medina, and he made it clear that it was his intention for all of Arabia and beyond beyond Arabia to come into the house of Islam. Okay, to come into the house of Islam. So now, so he dies 2 years later, rather suddenly. Okay, became very ill. It seemed like kind of feverish and stomach pain, whatever. And so the belief was quite popular is that he probably was poisoned by a Jew in retaliation for the beheadings. But a big issue opens up as to who is to lead the Muslim community now, right? And this is the last slide on this section. And that's where we take up or pick up in the next class, where we see that here, this is going to be then the beginnings of the major split between the Sunni and the Shia and the options available and how that all unfolds as Islam continues to grow and spread. Okay? All right. So that's it for today. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Okay? All righty. So now what do I'll do here? Stop share, stop recording.